Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Voices of eLearning. I'm your host, JW Marshall with Summit K-12, and we are so glad that you found us on this episode. We have not one, but two amazing guests from Cambium Learning Group and Cambium Assessments. We have with us John Jorgensen, CMO, and we also have Gary Phillips, the Vice President of Psychometrics. And we're going to dive into a recent study that Cambium Assessment has put out that is got a lot of good data that we need to be talking about now more than ever. So buckle up. We're going to get into some interesting data and interesting conversation. We always like to start out the show with kind of a quick overview, of each of our guests, and then we'll dive into our questions. And John, we'll start with you. Who are you, and what do you love about what you get to do with Cambium, and especially as it relates to this project on the assessments?
Yeah, well, thanks, JW. It's always great to be here. Great to see you. My name's John Jorgensen. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Cambium Learning Group, and my role at Cambium is kind of threefold. One is to help just tell the brand story for Cambium Learning Group. Who is this company, and what is it all about, and why should people care about that? So that's one thing. Another thing is I help each of our Cambium businesses to do the same thing. They all do really remarkable work. Cambium Assessment is one of those business units, and we try to help just share that story with the wider world as well. The third thing is, and this is really, really important, is, we are a growing, scaling business. And so it's important for us to make sure that we're really kind of walking the talk in terms of our purpose and our brand internally. So we spend a lot of time internally making sure that all of our employees feel seen, valued, and supported. That is our purpose as a company, is to help teachers and students feel seen, valued, and supported. So I spend a lot of time there. And that's important with recruiting people. Where, like I said, we're growing, we're hiring people, it's competitive. So that's another big part of my job. I'm really, really excited to be here today, just because this work that Gary's team has done is foundational for us being able to help teachers and students feel seen, valued, and supported in all sorts of ways. So really excited to be here.
Awesome. And John has been on many times if you're a longtime listener, viewer of our show. Gary, is your first appearance on the show. We're so excited to have you as our subject matter expert of the day. Gary, tell us just a little bit about who are you and what do you love about what you get to do with Cambium Assessment?
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a Vice President of Psychometrics at Cambium. I was a previous acting commissioner at the National Center for Education Statistics. So I've been around for a number of years doing analyses and research. The thing I like about Cambium is that it's a growing company. We're hiring a lot of technical people. We're in probably over 50% of the states, I believe. So we're doing a lot of exciting things, and this study was one of those.
Perfect. Yeah, and we know there's a lot of variance in how research is conducted. So we're excited to really dive into these questions with you. But first, John, if you could give us just a little bit of what were the key findings from Cambium Assessment's recent report?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So before we jump into the findings, just a quick overview of what this study was all about. So last month, Cambium Assessment launched its first annual longitudinal study to help examine the academic progress of the generation of students that have been affected by the pandemic. So again, Cambium Assessment is part of Cambium Learning Group, and it's the digital leader in state-level assessment. It serves more than half of the states in the US. And in the study, which Gary's going to talk about in much more depth, they followed the same 2.25 million students from 5 different states over 4 years to really get a full picture of student outcomes. And the research provides really much needed context for ed tech companies, for districts and educators to sort of chart the best path forward. So some really clear findings that came up. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. So one is that math performance had a dramatic double-digit drop from pre-pandemic in 2019 to post-pandemic in 2022. Across the grade groups, math proficiency dropped by an average of 17% from 2019 to 2022. Grade 4 had the most significant drop. 57% were doing on-level mathematics in 2019, and that dropped to 36% in 2021. So mathematics is a huge concern. English language arts performance also dropped, but not as significantly as mathematics on average. ELA proficiency dropped by about 6%. So still significant, but not nearly as dramatic as mathematics. The third thing is that the greater losses were observed for students representing historically marginalized communities. So Black students have experienced more significant or disproportionate percent proficiency decreases than other students. Hispanic students experienced the second most significant percent proficiency decrease. And then we had white students and Asian students. So there's really an equity issue here. It's not just the proficiency impact over the course of the pandemic, but the growing equity gap as well, which I know we're going to talk about more. So those are the key findings of the study, and we'll talk more about why the study is, as Gary said, what made this different, and why it's so important.
And then same question to you, Gary. Any key findings to add, as well as any additional research methodology to kind of give our audience a little bit of a sense of the quality of this study?
Yes. Okay, let me talk about the quality first. So the study was longitudinal. It's very similar to a clinical trial where you follow a patient. You have a patient before you give them medication, then you follow them after. So it was longitudinal. And it also is important to note that it was representative. So it was administered, the tests were administered in 5 states to the total population. So we have representative data. Some of the other vendors that have done these types of studies sort of cherry pick data from their customer base. We did not do that. We took 5 entire states, followed them over 4 years. So we had 3 cohorts, grades 3 through 6, grades 4 through 7, and grades 5 through 8. And so that gave us a good idea of what's going on in the lower grades and what's going on in the middle grades. So that's the difference. Ours was longitudinal. Other studies so far as I know, have all been cross-sectional, including the NAEP results. And the general findings, I think they were just mentioned, but maybe I'll highlight a few more. About half of these students were proficient in math prior to the pandemic. After the pandemic, there was a huge drop in the number of proficient students. For example, in grade 3, it dropped by 16%. Grade 4, it dropped by 21%. And grade 5, it dropped by 15%. So there was a huge drop. There was a moderate drop for ELA performance, but there was a huge drop for math. So that's one of the main findings starting out in the study. And we did that, by the way, by comparing 2019 to 2021. That's where we got an estimate of the learning drop. Then we went to 2022 to get an estimate of how much had been recovered, or how much still, how big of a drop was still left over after 2 years after the pandemic. So those were some of the major findings. We'll talk more about other findings later, I believe.
Yeah. And I want to get into why, obviously, if the report goes into why and prescriptions. But first, I have to ask, You guys set this study up before you even knew there was going to be a pandemic. How has the pandemic changed? Has it completely changed the focus? Or I guess what I'm trying to get at is what was the original intent before the pandemic? This ends up being kind of a really great study through the pandemic, but you set out well before the pandemic to do this study. What was the impetus to begin this project in the first place, if you can
Yeah,
recall a pre-pandemic
sure.
time?
Sure. Well, we already had data that was longitudinal because in these 5 states, we have contracts with these 5 states. And these were the states where we had contracts back to 2019. So we were already collecting this data. It just turned out that COVID happened in 2020. So we had data from 2019 for 3 cohorts, and then we were able to look at the data in 2021 and 2022. And in the future, we can look at data in 2023 and 2024. So we'll be able to track the trajectory of the pandemic in future years as well.
Perfect. And a lot of talk right now is also around a study that just came out from NAEP, as you referenced, in AEP. How does the Cambium assessment data compare with the NAEP study, and what are the key differentiators between that study?
Right. Yes, NAEP came out with 2 studies, actually. One was their age 9 long-term trend, and that was followed by their grade 4 and 8 cross-sectional. Both of those studies were cross-sectional, not longitudinal. And they did find very similar results to ours. I believe one thing that is different is that we found some additional issues with the demographic differences, because since we had longitudinal data, we had more information and could track it a little bit better. So we basically, our findings are in the same direction, but I think we had a little bit more information than that. Then, of course, we also had data. NAEP has grades 4 and 8. We have grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we had more data and could get a better look at the trajectory of achievement following the pandemic.
And were there any key differentiators in the margins of loss or recovery in 2022? Did everything kind of line up pretty well, given your study was more robust and longitudinal? Was their study in line with that, or were there any areas where it wasn't?
Okay, so one thing that we found, which went beyond the NAEP results, was that for demographic differences, the demographic differences in the base year were replicated every year after that. So that pattern in 2019 occurred again in 2021 and in 2022. And more importantly, again, this I think goes beyond the NAEP results, that pattern in the base year predicted the learning loss, so that it was inversely proportional to how well they were doing in the base. So the demographic differences predicted the learning loss, and that will be one of the things that we will be tracking in future years.
So really validated.
Hey, Gary,
go ahead.
Sorry, JW, I just wanted to ask Gary to dig a little deeper on one thing, because this is something that we've talked a lot about internally. Gary, I know that when it comes to the Cambium assessment study, one of the differences that we talked about was, every state has a different way of assessing their students. They have their own standards, tons of overlap, very similar, but they have specific assessments that are done at each state. And so this study is actually measuring what's happening state by state by state in a way that is both more precise and more relevant for the students and the educators in that state. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's a real good point. So The NAEP results are based on the NAEP standards. So they have basic, proficient, and advanced for grades 4 and 8. Those are not the state standards. Our results are based on the state standards. So they're closer locally to the states than NAEP. And what we used as the metric was the percent proficient in each state. So what we tracked was the drop in the percent proficient for each state. And yes, that is closer to what's actually going on in the states than what NAEP is reporting, because NAEP is a external test with its own standards, and they're not the standards in the state.
So the 5 states in the study are not named, and that probably gives more validity to people looking at those results and saying, "Oh, X state is known for this or known for that." But talk a little bit about why you decided to partner with these states and keep them kind of collectively together for the integrity of the data.
Right. Okay. So we decided to partner with these 5 states because they were the ones where we had good data going back to 2019 and good data to 2022. There are other states where we go back to 2020 or something like that. The states, in some cases, have their own learning loss study, which might be results might be a little bit different from the ones that we reported on. But the number of students that we included, and they're broadly representative of the country, kind of scattered all over. So we are very comfortable that the results broadly represent the country, and the states wanted to remain anonymous, and we did get permission from the states to use their data.
And just a reminder to the audience, 2.25 million students were included amongst these 5 states. That's a really large population to be studying with longitudinal data.
That's right.
I want to get a little bit more into the gaps. As we can imagine, between those subpopulations of students, the gaps got larger proportionally to where they were as a starting point. Why do you think that is? And maybe this is a question for John. What are we doing, or what should we be doing to help recover appropriately and proportionally with equity for these students that have been affected really in different ways depending on their subpopulation?
Yeah, no, I think, I'll definitely let Gary get into the detail a bit, but equity is a growing concern, not just at Cambium, but across education, across the ed tech space. This is something that it's not new. It's not that the pandemic certainly didn't cause there to be an equity gap, but when you look at these historically marginalized communities that Gary talked about, clearly there is an a socioeconomic gap that sort of overlays with that, and it's continuing to widen. And so companies like ours are constantly asking ourselves, what part can we play? And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later in terms of some of the actual things that Cambium is doing. But I think that is something that our company, again, it goes back to our purpose. If we really are going to be able to deliver on all teachers and students, that's not just, in certain zip codes, teachers and students, but all teachers and students feel seen, valued, and supported, then we have to look for ways to address that. And it's been a real challenge for many years. It's not going to be something that gets addressed, with a single, influx of funding or, state initiatives that get passed and suddenly everything is better. But it's going to take a sustained effort kind of across the spectrum. So I'll let Gary dig more into the detail, but that definitely is something that is absolutely top of mind for companies like ours as we're making decisions about products we develop and all of that.
Yes, I mean, the amazing thing about the results of the study is that the very same differences in performance between the demographic groups was sustained each year after the pandemic. And the unfortunate effect also was that the gaps that were there got larger as the years went by, and in some cases did not recover. Um, so again, the Asian students who are typically the highest performing, I started out with a very small gap or a very small learning loss and recovered almost all of it. African Americans started out with a lot of learning loss in 2021 and didn't recover very much of it at all in 2022. So the more disadvantaged groups are the ones that are going to have the hardest time catching up in the future. And in the future, we do intend to follow these demographic groups and see how well they do catch up in the future.
All right, give us some good news if you can, if there is any, in that recovery for all students combined. How much ground did we make up from the loss of 20 and 21? When you look at the data from 21 to 22, we did see a little bit of a bounce back. And how much more work do we have set ahead for us, especially for certain subpopulations, but just overall, are we turning the corner onto the back onto the right trajectory?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and we have pretty good information on that. So first of all, ELA. ELA had a moderate drop for all three cohorts. Unfortunately, and that was from 2019 to 2021. 2022, it dropped even more, a little bit, like 1% or 2%. So it did not recover in 2022 for ELA. In mathematics, there was some recovery in the upper grades. In the lower grades, there was no change. Like, for example, the grade 3 cohort had dropped 16% in 2021, and it was still down 16% in 2022. So some of the recovery that you see is in mathematics in the upper grades, none in ELA. I'm assuming that in future years there will be more recovery in the lower grades. And of course, there's always a question, why is this? Like, for example, why did the students drop more in math than in ELA? I have a theory, but it's just a theory. My theory is that reading and writing are skills, math is knowledge. And you would expect once you learned a skill to not lose it. But knowledge that you didn't acquire is obviously you're going to be less able in mathematics, for example, and since you missed that grade. Now, when you think about recovery, again, probably mathematics is something that you can get a book on and take a course, and now you know more mathematics. You can't really do that as well in reading and writing, which I think is more of a skill. But that's just my theory. There may be other explanations for it. By the way, other studies, including NAEP, have also found this pattern that the drop for ELA was smaller than the drop for math. And the drop for math is very troubling.
And John, I have a theory too. I'm happy to share, but do you have a theory on why math dropped more than reading?
I want to hear your theory first, JW.
I'll throw mine out there. As a parent myself with 3 young children, I will say that as parents became the primary teachers for a good year to 2 years, I think it was easier for me personally to read stories with my kids and to maybe not work on specific phonics, but just to keep reading as a part of the day-to-day of our kids' lives. I was not as inclined to go out and find a math workbook and teach math, foundational concept to foundational concept So part of my theory is that parents, it was easier when the burden was really laid on them in a lot of ways to maybe keep the books open, to keep reading with their kids, and maybe minimize that loss a little bit as just repetition of reading with their parents versus getting out again math books or math workbooks and doing what many parents would consider, and maybe students as well, the hard work of teaching and learning and building on the math. But that's my, as Gary said, personal theory. No, I don't have any longitudinal research other than my three test subjects in my home. Any theories you want to put out there, or thoughts on our theories?
So I certainly, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. I do think both of what you both shared, it makes good sense to me. I think that the idea of something being a skill, something that you actually learn how to do, as opposed to something where you are taking in knowledge and then like building on that knowledge in a really structured way. I mean, we see that over the course of a regular summer, where that occurs, that loss. And so, the summer slide is something that we've heard about for many years. This, in some ways, could be considered a very extreme version of that. So I think what Gary said, that sounds like a really sound theory to me. And I think your point, JW, is a really good one. I think that, we talk a lot about with elementary teachers, for example, and the difficulty of not just mathematics, but STEM in general, and how historically those have been difficult things. It's K-5 is so literacy focused, and most elementary teachers, by their own admission, feel much more comfortable teaching literacy. I won't get into science of reading and the challenges that's brought about more recently, because that is kind of that's
another podcast,
another show. But I think that this is something that is real. That just not feeling comfortable, just as a parent certainly wouldn't feel as comfortable kind of diving into mathematics that they haven't done for a long time. So both of you guys, I think, are putting forth interesting takes on this.
All right, well, we're almost out of time. I don't want to leave the last question to both of you. What is one key takeaway that you'd like for our audience to learn from the findings of this study? And let's start with Gary.
Well, I think my main one takeaway is that the learning loss due to the pandemic is real, and it's serious, and it's long lasting. So 2 years after, students still haven't recovered. And, it might take 3 years or 4 years just to get back to where they were in 2019. So we at Cambium, we intend to continue following this cohort. Again, it's kind of like medical research. The longer you follow people, in a clinical trial, the more you learn about them. We're going to do the same thing here.
And the better you can serve those patients, the students now and in the future. And I think that's a big silver lining, that we really need to learn and address the immediate need, but also make it better for students in the future that don't have to go through a pandemic.
Yes.
And same question, John, I'll give you the last word. What's the one key takeaway that you have from the study?
Oh, yeah. Well, as Gary said, this is something at the Cambium assessment level that is going to continue into the future, no doubt. When you ask the question that way, I go back to when I was a kid myself, and I remember, coming home and upset about something and talking to my father and, saying, this happened and that happened and this isn't fair and that's not fair. And I remember he would always listen to me. Like he would, he acknowledged what I was saying, but he would always, then say that, I hear you. What are you going to do about it? And so I think that's kind of where I'm at with all of this is, what, and I would ask all of us this question, what are we all going to do about it? And so, me being at Cambium, working with people like Gary, we're every day thinking about ways that we can do something. So just a couple of examples, eLearning, another Cambium business, has speaking of science of reading, a science of reading professional learning product called Letters. which is specifically designed to teach teachers how to teach reading using the science of reading. And so that's an example of a product that is designed to kind of get at the heart of these issues. Why are these sustained results happening? Not just with as a result of COVID, but overall with proficiency. Well, if teachers are not able to teach reading using the science of reading, then they're going to continue to have the same problems. So I think those are the kinds of solutions that we are making investments in to try to have a more sustained effort that's going to help in the longer run. So I would encourage all ed tech companies like ours, not just Cambium, and even outside of the ed tech space, anyone who's in education, what part can you play to again help these kids and these teachers feel seen, valued, and supported? That can take all sorts of forms, whether it's legislation or just volunteering, providing support, just prioritizing teachers as professionals, all sorts of things all of us can do. Certainly at ed tech companies, we're focused on the solutions that will create kind of sustained impact going forward. So we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. It's going to take all of us. And I think the key buzzword I've been hearing for the last year or two is acceleration. What can we do to accelerate learning? Because that's the only way we're going to make up the difference, right? Yeah, we could do longer school days or a few other things you could do, but with the time we have, how do we make it more efficient, more engaging, more effective for the students? And my big hope is if we can start figuring that out, and I think we are in some pockets, and we'll keep focused, that these students will actually be the beneficiaries of this terrible trauma that we've all experienced as a group, is the learning practices will get better, the rate of learning can get faster, more efficient, and these students not only can catch up, but they could actually be ahead of where they would have been if we would have been following the status quo from 2019 pre-pandemic levels, and especially for those student populations that the gap is already there. It's already been big. It's gotten bigger. The pandemic's shown the light on that. And what can we do to accelerate learning for those students so that we can make up that ground and help those students get ahead in the future, and future generations of students either not get behind or have the ability to get ahead as well. I think it's overall an exciting time in education. We're ripe for some systemic change for the better. But we've got to stay focused. And that's why we do this show. And that's why we love having you on and sharing the good work that you're doing with Cambium Assessments and the other Cambium companies. Keep up the great work. And thank you so much for joining today's episode.
Thank you very much.
JW.
And to our audience, thank you so much for joining another episode of the Voices of eLearning podcast. I've been your host, JW Marshall, and we are very excited for you to check out past episodes talking about learning loss or unrealized learning, talking about solutions, and certainly continue to join us throughout the end of the year as we begin season 3 starting in January. Thank you again, and remember to always keep learning.